Daniel never thought he would be late on rent. He was the type of man who kept his word, paid his bills on time, and avoided owing anyone anything. But life had shifted too quickly. His hours at the factory were cut, the extra weekend shifts gone. And soon his savings disappeared like water through his fingers. Each day he told himself he would figure it out, that something would change. But the first of the month arrived, and he found himself standing at the bottom of the stairs that led to his landlady's apartment. His heart heavy, his pride aching. The house he lived in was old, with wide, creaky stairs and windows that rattled when the wind pushed through. Claire, his landlady, owned the whole place. She lived upstairs while renting out the rooms below. She wasn't like the usual landlords Daniel had met, cold, businesslike, always focused on money. Claire was different. She carried herself with quiet grace. In her early 40s, she was elegant without trying, her blonde hair tied in loose waves, her clothes simple but neat. There was something about her presence, warm, steady, and strangely calming, that made tenants feel cared for instead of managed. Daniel hesitated at her door. The words he had rehearsed stuck in his throat. He hated asking for mercy, hated the thought of looking weak. But he couldn't hide from it forever. Taking a deep breath, he knocked. When the door opened, the smell of fresh coffee drifted into the hallway. Claire stood there, her blue eyes settling on him with quiet concern. She didn't look annoyed, didn't even frown. She simply studied him, as if she could see through the mask of pride he tried to wear. "Daniel," she said softly, "is everything all right?" He forced a nod, though his chest felt tight. I need to talk to you. It's about the rent." Her expression didn't change much. But he noticed the small lift of her brows, the way her lips pressed together thoughtfully. She didn't scold him or sigh with impatience the way he expected. Instead, she opened the door wider and said, "Come inside. We'll talk." The warmth of her kitchen wrapped around him the moment he stepped in. The walls were painted a pale yellow, shelves lined with old books and potted plants. It was the kind of space that felt lived in, a place that held memories. Claire gestured for him to sit at the small round table near the window, then poured coffee into 2 mugs without asking if he wanted any. Daniel sat stiffly, his hands gripping the edge of the chair. He tried to speak, but shame burned his throat. Finally, he managed, "I'm short this month. I don't know when I'll catch up. But I didn't want you to think I was ignoring it." Claire placed a steaming mug in front of him and sat down across the table. She leaned forward slightly, her gaze steady. "Thank you for telling me," she said. Her voice was calm, almost kind. "You've been a good tenant. You keep the place clean. You don't cause trouble. That matters too." Her words caught him off guard. He had expected disappointment, maybe even anger. Instead, she sounded almost understanding, as if she knew more than he was saying. He lowered his eyes to the coffee, unsure how to respond. She let the silence linger for a moment, sipping her drink. Then she said something that sent his heart racing. "I don't want you to worry about eviction. That's not what I'm after." Daniel looked up quickly, his relief tangled with confusion. What did she mean by that? He wanted to ask, but something in her calm, unreadable expression kept him still. Sitting in that kitchen, with the rain tapping lightly against the window, Daniel realized this conversation was going to change more than just his living arrangements. He didn't know how or why, but he felt it in the way her eyes lingered on him, the way her voice softened when she spoke, and as he sat there holding the warm mug between his hands. He wondered what kind of plan Claire had in mind. Claire's kitchen felt warmer than usual, though Daniel couldn't tell if it was from the steaming mug in his hands or the way her steady gaze rested on him. He sat there, tense, waiting for her to name a number or give him a deadline. Instead, she leaned back in her chair as if she had all the time in the world, and said quietly, "You don't need to panic. You're not losing your place." Daniel let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Relief washed through him, but it quickly turned into unease. He was grateful, but what did this mean? Nothing in life was ever free, and he knew that well. Claire tilted her head, watching him carefully. Money isn't always the only way to pay. There are other things people need, things money doesn't buy. Her tone was calm, almost thoughtful, as though she were working through the idea out loud. His brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" Her lips curved slightly. Not quite a smile, but not distant either. "I live in this big house alone. Most of the time, the silence feels heavier than the walls themselves. I don't just want tenants. I want company. Someone to talk to. Someone who doesn't make me feel like a stranger in my own home." Her words struck something inside him. Daniel had been lonely too. Since moving into the city, his days had been nothing but work, sleep, and the occasional small talk with coworkers who didn't really know him. He hadn't realized how much he missed sitting down with someone who actually cared to listen. He tried to clear his throat. "So you're saying—" "I'm saying," Claire interrupted gently, "that maybe we could make our own kind of arrangement. A special payment plan. Less about money, more about time." Daniel blinked, uncertain. "Time, yes. Come upstairs once in a while. Share a cup of coffee. Help me carry groceries, fix a light, maybe stay for dinner when I cook too much. Simple things. You'd be surprised how far little things can go when someone is used to being alone." Daniel stared at her. It wasn't what he expected. It wasn't harsh or transactional. It was human, almost vulnerable. Still, part of him wondered if it was wise. He was younger, she was older, and this wasn't just business anymore. Seeing his hesitation, Claire leaned closer, her voice softer. "Don't look so worried. I'm not asking for anything you can't give. Just your company. That's all I want." Her eyes held his in a way that made his chest tighten. She looked steady, but there was a flicker beneath her calm loneliness she tried to hide. And for the first time, Daniel realized this wasn't just about her helping him. This was about her needing something too. He lowered his gaze, running a hand through his hair. "I don't know if I'd be very good company." Claire chuckled lightly, the sound warm, almost playful. "You're here talking to me, aren't you? That's a start." Her words disarmed him, loosening the knot in his chest. Slowly, he nodded. "All right, I'll do it. If this is what you want, I'll agree." Claire's smile grew, soft but real. And for a brief moment, Daniel thought she looked younger, almost free of the weight she carried. Then it settled, she said, that as he left her apartment that night, the agreement felt strange in his mind. It wasn't a deal about rent anymore. It was a bond, something unspoken but heavy with meaning. And though he didn't quite understand what he had stepped into, Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that this plan would draw him closer to her than he ever imagined. At first, the new arrangement felt harmless. Daniel visited Claire's kitchen in the evenings after work, sometimes only for a quick coffee, other times staying longer when conversation carried on. They spoke about little things, her garden that never grew the way she wanted, his job that drained him more than it paid him, the books she loved but never finished. What surprised him was how natural it felt. She didn't treat him like a tenant anymore. She treated him like someone important, someone she wanted near. As days passed, the space between them shrank without either of them noticing. When Daniel helped her with errands, she walked beside him as though they had done it for years. When he fixed a flickering lamp, she stood nearby, her presence calm and steady, thanking him with a smile that lingered longer than needed. Their hands brushed one evening when she passed him a plate, and instead of pulling away, she let the touch rest for a heartbeat. That single second echoed in his chest long after. Daniel told himself it was just kindness, that Claire was simply grateful for the company. But something shifted. He began to look forward to her voice at the end of a tiring day, the way she tilted her head when she listened, the way her laughter filled the air like sunlight breaking through clouds. He started noticing small details, her favorite mug with the chipped handle, the soft fragrance of lavender in her living room, the way her eyes lit up when he remembered something she had mentioned before. One night, the rain poured outside while they sat at her table. She had asked him to stay for dinner since she had cooked too much pasta. The meal was simple, but sharing it made it feel like more than food. They ate slowly, talking about nothing and everything, until the storm outside grew louder. Afterward, they stood by the window, shoulder to shoulder, watching the rain streak down the glass. The room was dim, only the glow of a lamp lighting their faces. Claire's voice broke the silence. "You've been more than a tenant to me, Daniel." The words hit him hard. He turned to her, searching her face. Her expression was soft, almost fragile, her eyes carrying something unspoken. His throat tightened. He wanted to answer, to admit how much he had come to crave these moments, but fear held him back. What if he said too much? What if he ruined everything? So he only nodded, his silence heavier than words. Claire smiled faintly, though there was sadness in it, as if she had expected his hesitation. Still, she didn't pull away. Instead, she reached out and rested her hand lightly on his arm. The simple gesture sent warmth through him. A warmth that stayed even when he went back downstairs later. That night, Daniel couldn't sleep. He lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying her words again and again. More than a tenant. What did she mean? Did she see him the way he was beginning to see her? Or was this just her way of filling loneliness with comfort? His thoughts tangled until dawn, leaving him restless but certain of one thing. The plan they had agreed upon was no longer about rent. It had become something far more dangerous and far more tender by the time the sun rose. Daniel realized he was standing on the edge of something he couldn't name. He had stepped into Claire's world as a tenant, but now he was caught in feelings that neither of them had planned for. And though he didn't know where it would lead, he couldn't deny he wanted to follow. The weeks that followed were different. What started as coffee and small favors grew into evenings filled with laughter. Long talks and quiet silences that carried more meaning than words. Daniel no longer thought of his visits as part of a plan. He wanted to be there. He wanted to see Claire smile when he knocked on her door, hear her voice call his name. Feel the warmth of her presence, yet underneath the comfort, he carried unease. Claire was older, and her life carried a history he didn't fully know. Sometimes she would mention her failed marriage, in fragments how trust had been broken, how silence had grown heavier than love. Each time Daniel saw the flicker of pain in her eyes, and he wondered if he was only filling a gap, a temporary comfort in a house that echoed with too much loneliness. One evening, the air was cooler, the first signs of fall drifting through the open window. Claire had lit a single lamp, casting a golden glow across the room. Music played softly from an old radio, something slow and tender. Daniel sat across from her, and though they spoke of ordinary things, his mind was far from calm. He could no longer ignore what he felt. Every glance lingered too long, every word carried too much weight suddenly. Claire set her cup down and looked at him directly. "Daniel," she said, her voice low but steady, "do you ever feel like this house is too big for one heart?" The question silenced him. He searched her face, seeing vulnerability there's something she rarely allowed to show. It wasn't just about the house. It was about her. It was about the emptiness she carried, the longing she couldn't put into plain words. Daniel swallowed hard. He could lie, pretend he didn't understand, keep things safe. Or he could tell the truth that had been building inside him. Since the first time he saw her smile linger too long, "I do," he whispered finally. "And I don't think it has to stay that way." Her eyes shimmered, the kind of shine that comes before tears. For a moment, she didn't speak. Then she reached across the table and took his hand. Her fingers were warm, trembling slightly, as if she too was afraid of the step they were about to take. "Daniel," she said softly, "this was never about rent. Not really. It was about finding someone who could see me. Someone who wouldn't walk away." The honesty in her words struck him deeper than anything she had said before. He tightened his hold on her hand, his voice firm, though his heart raced. "Then you found that person. I'm not going anywhere." Silence wrapped around them, but it was no longer heavy. It was filled with the unspoken truth they had both carried alone. Claire's lips curved into a fragile smile, and though tears threatened to fall, her eyes glowed with something Daniel had never seen in them before: hope. That night marked a shift neither of them could undo. Their special payment plan had transformed into something far more real, far more dangerous, and far more beautiful. Daniel no longer thought of himself as just a tenant, and Claire no longer saw him as someone passing through. They had crossed a line, and while the future remained uncertain, one thing was clear: their hearts had chosen each other. And as Daniel left her apartment later that evening, the cool night air brushing against his skin, he knew his life had changed forever. What began with a missed rent payment had led him to something priceless: love that demanded courage, patience, and faith. A love worth every risk.